Yeah, the Green Party actually released a main plank of its platform on this recently because 43% of renter households, that's 250,000 people in BC, are paying more than 30% of their income in rent. That just pushes people into homelessness. The BC Greens goal is that by 2030, everybody has a home that they can afford and that meets their needs. So there is going to be a major support for rent in BC. $400 rebate by the BC NUP is less than what the BC Greens would earmark, which is $500 million for the program. It's also related to mental health. Our mental health services are not included within MSP. So the BC Greens would allocate $1 billion over 4 years to address mental health issues in the province and bring it in to MSP. But from a wider sense, there are underemployed and unemployed folks that come from boom and bust economies that fossil fuels and dependence on fossil fuels bring about. How many people are homeless because they're out of work from oil and gas? We need to move on and shift to more innovative sectors in our economy.
Thanks, Owen. We're gonna move on to our next question. Currently, the BC Homeowners Grant Program does not provide additional grants for our war veterans, other than those who served in the Korean War or the Second World War. If you were elected as our representative, how would you address this issue and how would you support our veterans in other ways? And we'll start with Owen again.
Big isn't always beautiful, so I am looking to be an MLA within a very small caucus. It would have been 3 with Andrew Weaver. Even if we doubled our representation, it would be 6. That means that the shoe shop would have a overlarge voice in a party that held power in the province. That gives me the ability to bring the position of our veterans to the relevant ministry within the government and represent them as best I could. So I would take that to the minister in charge.
Thank you. Greg?
Yeah, thank you. I'm not familiar with that particular program. Certainly I'm familiar with the BC Homeowners Grant, which is a grant that's available for all British Columbians. But I'm not familiar with the additional homeowners grant that might be available for service veterans. But I would suggest that all of those individuals that serve on behalf of Canada, any of the freedoms that we enjoy today, that it would be something that would be definitely worthwhile having a look into, and then having a determination, what the ultimate cost would be and why there's any differentiation currently between service and different wars. I would suspect that the large majority of British Columbians would expect that anybody that has a service history on behalf of Canada in our armed forces should be eligible and worthy of having the same deduction, regardless of what particular conflict they fought in.
Thank you. Sylvia?
Thanks, Adam. So during the years that the BC Liberals were in Parliament, they closed a lot of the Veterans Affairs offices and reduced supports that veterans were able to access, like mental health services. And so this particular program, I don't know why it would differentiate between who served in which war, except for that there may be age parameters that fall because of the length of time in the past that these wars happened. Seniors in our community already get the BC Homeowner Grant, and if there are situations where people need access to more access to tax reductions for their homes, I think that's a program that's worth exploring. I would make sure that people in our community get to talk to me about what the issues are that they're experiencing. I know that one of them is significant is PTSD and mental health issues, and the rate of suicide in veterans is quite high. And to make sure that the services that they need to be healthy and to work their way through those issues is available here in Salmon Arm and close by, so that they can be with their family while they're receiving treatment.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the next question. This past summer, we saw an unprecedented algae bloom cover the full extent of the Salmon Arm Bay of the Shuswap Lake and persist through the complete tourism season. It would seem that all government ministries, whether it was IHA, water, environmental, would only monitor the situation. There appeared to be no investigation or fines levied against those polluting the lake. If your political party was to form government, what would you do to immediately take action against those that are contributing to the problem, whether it's farming practices, failing septic tanks, sewage treatment quality, or for other reasons? And we'll start with Greg.
Great, thank you. I just want to correct a comment that Sylvia had made. Provincial government closed no veterans offices in BC. All veteran offices are actually the responsibility of the federal government. So just wanted to correct that on the record. With respect to the quality of Shuswap Lake, obviously Shuswap Lake is an amazing gem. It's some of the best boating opportunities we have in Western Canada. And I think it's in all of our collective best interest to make sure that we're looking after the health of Shuswap Lake. When it comes to the algae bloom that was experienced this year, obviously I was aware of it, I saw it, I heard what's going on, but I was not aware that the Ministry of Environment did not actually take more appropriate action, which I would have expected would have included to try and determine the cause. Now, we certainly had a significant amount of water runoff this year. If that potentially contributed to the nitrate loading of the lake, it's something that should certainly be investigated. And maybe Sylvia Lindgren, as a representative for the NDP, might be able to ask or answer the question on why the Ministry of Environment did not actually take the investigative measures to try and determine the cause of this algae bloom.
That's Sylvia, that's your cue.
Thanks, nice lead in. So, I mean, I think that people know that there are a number of causes of algae blooms, nitrate and phosphate being the main ones. Some of them those are naturally occurring. Some of those are caused by human activity. And I think that it is important that the government look into why these things are happening, and I believe that they are. They've already formed a number of solutions to the water issues due to the significant issues that Armstrong and the area had that seemed to be caused by farming practices and were causing issues with the water table there. And so because of that, they've formed a group that is looking into causes of, protecting the water systems across the province. And I think that it would be pretty optimistic to think that an algae bloom can happen and 2 weeks later the government has prioritized your algae bloom and determined immediately what's happened, why it's happened, and how we're going to stop it from happening again. We all know that government doesn't move that fast. We all know that we're not the only place in the province that might have water issues. And I believe that the NDP is working on these water issues and will eventually come to us with some explanation of why it's happening and some solutions to solve it.
Okay, thanks, Sylvia. Owen.
Yeah, thankfully, within the Fraser Basin Council, there's an entity called the Shuswap Watershed Council, and they've luckily done a lot of study on what happened. Most likely, it's rivers like the Salmon River flowing into the Shuswap with high amounts of phosphorus from phosphorus deposits that can only be legacy in farming because modern day conventional farming don't really put phosphorus on their ground so much. If it was found that they were, then the Agriculture and Environmental Management Code of Practice, that's a long term, would help us, and I would take that to the relevant ministry, the Minister for Agriculture. Secondly, the nutrient-dense effluent from the Salmon Arm wastewater treatment plant needs to be looked at. Has it been up? Has it been down? It is a shame that nobody has stepped in and actually taken control. I think we'll start with the Minister for Agriculture using the Code of Practice, asking farmers, especially around Silver Creek, are they using phosphorus? It's unlikely. It's very different to the Hull Care aquifer because that was caused by manure deposited by a big dairy. So lots to investigate. The province should be supporting the Shuswap Watershed Council in its work.
Thank you, Owen. We're going to move on to the next question. Do you believe climate changes have impacted our community? Please give us an example of how any climate change impacts it may be addressed.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, I do believe that climate changes have impacted our community. They've impacted our community through a number of ways. You know, we get a lot of our food from other areas, primarily from south of us where it's warmer, and with the number of fires and the droughts that California experiences and Mexico and into the South America experiences, it's definitely affected our food chain. I think that one of the things that we saw this year in the city of Salmon Arm was fire smarting. And the reason that we're doing that, there's a local company that's going through the forest up in Little Mountain area, for instance, and that's done with provincial funding to make sure that they clean up any stuff on the ground, stuff that burns easily and takes out the small trees, to make sure that if a fire does happen here, and it's, you know, it's possible with climate change, things are drier, summers are hotter, that we make sure that we're not endangering residents of Salmon Arm.
Thank you. Owen.
Yeah, our farm business considers itself part of the community, and our farm business has been hit by climate change in the last number of years, especially in 2018 and the year before, when the skies are full of smoke. Our organic vegetables do not grow as they should. Our earnings were down, and the number of people that we were able to supply with food was down. And it happened again this year for 2 weeks in September. Again, our production is down. So climate change is a food security issue, with California feeding more than half of British Columbians with food, or more than 50% of the food we consume. It is inundated with wildfires too. So where we will feel the pinch of climate change locally is in the cost of food. And we need action. Neither the BC Liberals nor the BC NDP have fulfilled their promises on meeting our targets on climate changing gases.
Thank you. Greg?
Great, thank you. Yeah, as the other two candidates have indicated, forest fires is likely one of the largest impacts that we've had in the local area. Even the wildfires south of our border this year, the amount of smoke that came in certainly caused a lot of challenges with health, as far as the air quality goes. And so, you know, the impacts are pretty significant. The climate is always changing. And one of the challenges I think that we have going forward is to have a look at, you know, what those causes are and what can we do to actually reduce our carbon footprint. As many of you listening in today will be aware, it was the BC Liberal government that brought in the carbon tax back in 2008. We were the first jurisdiction in North America to actually put a price on carbon, or a price on pollution. And it was interesting, back in the day, the NDP actually opposed the carbon tax. They had a big program about axe the tax. They did not support it. And so it's interesting, here we are 12 years later with the carbon tax, other jurisdictions across North America, all accepting and moving forward on a model that was actually brought in by the previous BC Liberal government. When we look at the Clean BC plan, this is the new NDP plan for tackling climate in our province. Unfortunately, 25% of our carbon reduction emission targets have yet to be identified. So I think that is a challenge. I think for any of us at home, might be planning a budget, you can't plan for only 75%. A plan is not complete until you've accounted for all of the required emission reductions. And unfortunately, although there's been a lot of hype put out by the NDP with respect to Clean BC and their climate action plan, there's a big gaping 25% hole in their current plan. And the current plan still does not even take into consideration the third and fourth trains that are going to be put in by LNG Canada, which are just going to be that much more problematic. So again, just can't say enough about the fact that BC Liberal government was leading with the introduction of the carbon tax back in 2008, and we would continue to support that going forward.
Thank you. On to the next question. What is your party's stance on supporting small-scale craft growers in BC, including legalized cannabis growers? And we'll start with Greg.
So obviously, BC Liberal government, free enterprise government, very supportive of small business, very supportive of making sure that businesses across our province are competitive from a tax perspective, And also that we're always trying to reduce red tape and regulatory burden to make it that much easier for small business to operate in our province. When it comes to cannabis cultivation is actually the responsibility of the federal government. The federal government has responsibility for all the production of cannabis across the province. And so it'd probably be untoward for me to comment specifically on cannabis because that is under federal jurisdiction. The province has responsibility for the retailing of cannabis products in BC. But, can't say enough about the ingenuity of entrepreneurs, small business owners. And it's very important that government make sure that they're always having a look at the competitive tax structure of our province to make sure that any resident of British Columbia that chooses to open up shop here, that they can be competitive from a tax standpoint with other jurisdictions across Canada. What we've seen under the NDP government is a continued adding on of additional burdens of taxes on a small business. Specifically, the new employer health tax put an additional $1.9 billion of new taxes right on the backs of struggling businesses here in BC.
On to Sylvia's response.
Thanks. Just to clarify, the employer health tax is only on the big businesses in BC. There are no small businesses. You have to earn more than $500,000 a year, I believe it is, before you even pay any of that. And above that, it's actually a graduated amount. So small businesses are not being burdened by the health tax, that's for sure. I think the NDP have shown that they're in favor of supporting all small businesses, not just small scale craft growers in BC. And they've certainly been in favor of legalizing cannabis for a long time. They campaigned on that in 2017 before it was actually legal in this province. And so I expect that the BC NDP will move forward with further supports for all small business, including, I believe they cut the PST for small business so that they could invest in their own for acquiring, capital purchases so that they could move forward and enlarging their business or expanding what they do.
Thank you. Owen?
Yeah, hot off the press, the BC Greens have announced today, actually, I'm reading it in my emails right now, that we would cover any small business, including a small crafter working with cannabis, 25% of their rental cost for 6 months. It's a pretty generous offer. In general, widening it out, the attitude of the Green Party is that we should be making more of our resources. So the value add that can come from cannabis, be it oils, treatments, food, we give our dog CBD sometimes. So it's about making something of our raw resources, not like in our timber supply, moving raw logs south. What is the IKEA of BC? That is how the Green Party thinks. And that was how we would support local crafters.
Thank you, Owen. We'll move on to the next question. During these difficult times, small business, and in particular the tourism industry, has suffered greatly within our region. What are your party's plans to assist and support small business in this region? And we'll start with Sylvia.
Thanks, Adam. So we know that our region relies heavily on the tourism industry, and tourism is, pretty low this year. We did a tour up to Prince Rupert this year and didn't have a problem getting into any of the campgrounds. So we know that tourism was down this year, and because of that, so is money that's traveling around our small businesses. So I think that this comes back to supporting businesses of all types to make sure that business owners, hotels, restaurants, the retail stores have what they need to make sure that their businesses are viable. Different regions are responsible for their own tourism advertising and drawing customers in. And I know that the Shuswap region has a pretty robust program that they're working together with the provincial government to make sure that we are advertising what we have going for us here and to make sure that we bring people back to the Shuswap.
Thanks, Sylvia. Owen?
Yeah, the BC Greens has committed to spending $300 million over 6 months, reducing the cost of rent for small businesses, including the tourism industry locally. Writ large, what is BC synonymous with? Is synonymous with a pristine environment. People don't come here to see pipelines, oil pipelines, gas pipelines, LNG terminals, coal trains rolling through Salmon Arm, albeit full of metallurgical coal sometimes, which makes steel. BC Greens will protect our natural assets, protect our parks, run them really well to ensure that we have a vibrant tourism industry moving forward.
Thank you, Owen. Greg?
Great. One of the main planks of the BC Liberal platform is to actually eliminate the provincial sales tax for a full year as of January 1st, should we form government, and then to re-implement it at 3% for the second and subsequent years to help to spearhead the economy. We're in unprecedented times. We have record high unemployment rate, record high deficits, and now is the time for a government that actually understands economics to actually put their shoulder to the wheel and to provide those necessary supports so that we can create those all-important family supporting jobs. In addition to that, I just have to have a look at the current government. All parties got together in the spring session. It was an exceptional session where we unanimously approved a $5 billion economic recovery budget. $5 billion. Of that, $2 billion was identified to help support small business. John Horgan, who actually chaired the Economic Recovery Task Force, did not have a position with any of the tourism industry associations directly on that task force. And he sat on those funds. Now, those funds that were approved back in the spring, the intention was that those funds would get out to help businesses that are struggling with meeting payroll. But he sat on it. And we only saw just 2 short weeks ago an announcement with finally this big election or the economic recovery strategy, which unfortunately has now been stalled out. So within 4 days of making the announcement on the big economic recovery strategy, the $1.5 billion that's going to be put out to help small business, he actually shut government down. Government has shut down. There's no ministers working. Justine Hunter, one of the writers for Globe and Mail, did a very scathing article here a few days ago and confirmed that none of the funds from the economic recovery strategy are going to flow in this calendar year on account of the necessary snap election. Should we form government, we will change that, we'll fix that. We will be there to support businesses, create those all-important family-supporting jobs.
Thanks, Greg. We're going to move on to the next question. I'm sure we'll talk on that again. The lack of stable and readily available broadband telecommunication infrastructure in certain areas of Salmon Arm, as well as the rural communities, have been a serious impediment to our business and our economic development opportunities. What will you do to improve the situation for our city and for our rural business community? And we'll start with Owen.
Yeah, so big isn't necessarily beautiful with the NUP being so urban focused. It's hard to imagine the level to which we need to be heard to fix issue representation would have just six MLAs, the Shuswap being one of the ridings represented in that, holding the balance of power within a shared power arrangement. That gives us a strong voice. I would take the situation in Salmon Arm to whatever minister I felt was capable of fixing it, and I would represent my constituents. They could come to me at a constituent's office, which I'd love to have in Salmon Arm.
Thank you, Owen. Greg?
Thank you. Well, internet is extremely important. When we have a look at the infrastructure of a country or a nation, whether it's roads, rail lines, pipelines, our ports, the infrastructure is so important. And when we have a look at internet, it is no longer just an option. It is an absolute necessity, whether it is for conducting business, for education. We have a look at, even with COVID, the number of children last spring that were actually trying to get educated from home. We owe it to every British Columbia to make sure that internet and decent internet with a high upload speed and high download speed is available across our province. I don't have the specifics of our election platform on that particular item in front of me, but I would certainly be advocating for improving internet connectivity for all British Columbians, especially in rural and remote areas here in British Columbia.
Thank you, Greg. Sylvia?
Thanks. I think the NDP government has been quite public about their support for rural communities and for developing business plans there and economic development opportunities. And they recognize that the internet broadband access is pretty crucial. But I think that we've seen through the pandemic, through the school system particularly, that broadband is not currently equitably distributed across the province, and that some kids are missing out on school opportunities because they can't get connected, particularly in the spring when school went completely online. And so I think that that's become a more current issue for the NDP, and they recognize that this is something that needs to be worked on as quickly as possible. The companies that provide internet, of course, prefer to install their services in areas where they're going to get the most money for them. And unfortunately, that is the nature of capitalism, I guess. And so until we find a way to work with the companies that provide the internet services and make sure that they're being provided in all areas, not just the, for instance, our own industrial park doesn't really have adequate services, then I think that we'll have to continue to push the government, and the NDP will have to continue to push and work with the broadband companies.
Thank you, Sylvia. We'll move on to the next question. Liberal candidate Andrew Wilkinson has put forward an election promise to eliminate the provincial sales tax for 1 year. Could you please explain how this would impact and/or benefit lower-income households? And how does your party plan to make up for the revenue shortfalls of this tax elimination? We'll start with Greg.
Great, well, thank you. Yeah, it's a pretty significant plank of the BC Liberal platform. As you know, the BC Business Council and chief economists across British Columbia have been advocating and asking the provincial government since this past spring for a 50% reduction in provincial sales tax in order to help provide savings for average British Columbians. And of course, BC Liberals have done that one more by eliminating PST for the first year, and then, as I mentioned, moving it to 3% in subsequent years until the economy recovers. PST is a regressive tax. People that are low and middle income spend a higher proportionate share of their income on provincial sales tax than somebody in the higher income bracket. So the provincial sales tax, even for somebody making minimum wage, in the first year, that provide over $500 in savings, and for a family of four, upwards of $1,700 in annual savings. But if you have a look at what that also will do for small businesses, a small business that might be buying a new forklift or a delivery van, to save the provincial sales tax on a $50,000 delivery van, that's $3,500 in savings. In addition, for new home buyers, the reduction in PST for a full year could reduce the price of a home by upwards of $9,000 for a condo, a 500 square foot condo, and for a single family home, upwards of $19,000. When we talk about housing affordability, the PST reduction will certainly put money back in the hands of British Columbians. As far as the whole focus of this PST reduction plan is to help spearhead the economy, and with more people working, paying taxes, there'll be more money flowing back to the provincial government.
We'll have to move on. Thank you, Greg. Sylvia?
Thanks, Adam. So it's interesting, Greg keeps using the term plank, because for me, this plank is the one that the pirates put over the side and tell you to walk the plank. I can't imagine how the Liberals are possibly going to twist this into something that's going to benefit low-income households, because it's not. The reality is in BC is that we don't pay PST on necessary items like groceries. And so this will affect people who have expendable income. And during the pandemic, people don't have expendable income. People have lost their jobs. People are living on CERB. They're just struggling to make ends meet. They're worried about, where their next job will be or where the next paycheck will come from. They're not out buying cars and houses right now. And so the people that this will benefit are the people that always benefit from Liberal tax cuts, and that's the people with the most money that need the least help. So I have no idea what will happen if this actually, well, I have a pretty good idea actually of what will happen if if the Liberals were to take power and they institute this. You can guarantee that we'll lose $3 billion or more of our public services that we all rely on, our healthcare that we need desperately while we're going through a pandemic. And we will end up with higher taxes, perhaps putting the MSP back in, which will just go right back out of the pockets of the people who need the most help. So I think this is a backwards plan that only benefits the people that don't need help.
Thank you, Sylvia. Owen?
Yeah, as farmers, we don't charge PST on our food. So the people who receive our food, whether it's low income or not, they don't benefit from this. But I'm sure there's PST on yachts, and people with a lot of money do benefit from it. Short-termism, like putting a $7 billion hole in our economics, in our budget. It's not how the BC Greens thinks. We think long term, and we don't get into silly season and make promises like that. However, the BC NUP does give rather large tax breaks to corporations like LNG Canada, who don't have to pay the regular carbon tax the same way everybody else does. So it seems both parties do want to benefit the rich with tax breaks, whereas the Green Party is brave enough to call it out and say we can't afford a $7 billion hole in our budget at this time when we're coping with a pandemic.
Thank you, Owen. We'll move on to the next question. Canadians often pay more for cell phone and internet charges than anywhere else in the world. Will your party commit to eliminating additional barriers to encourage more providers to offer services in the Shuswap region? We'll start with Owen.
Short and sweet answer. Having grown up in Ireland and experienced cell coverage in Ireland and Europe, it's astounding how much we pay for our cell phone coverage in BC. It's quite disgraceful, and across the country. I won't pretend to know exactly how we've arrived in the situation we're in, but if were I the MLA for the Shuswap, I would know what those barriers were and get to work fixing it, because we're being ripped off by cell phone providers.
Thank you. Greg?
Yeah, so cell phone and internet provision is largely a federal issue. But I do know that again, back to the provincial sales tax, everything from cable bills to cell phone bills to hydro to Fortis gas to a new set of runners all have provincial sales tax. And so the provincial sales tax reduction and elimination for 1 year and then reduction in subsequent years will have a significant impact and actually put money back in the pockets of British Columbians. But when it comes to competition, as a free enterprise party, we certainly encourage competition, something that is very different from the NDP that want to have specific programs to only provide job opportunities for their hand-picked unions. And again, this is going back to the community benefit agreements that are put in place on Highway Number 1 infrastructure. These CBA agreements are discriminatory. They're cutting out 85% of construction workers in our province. And I think that the NDP need to be pulling that back. It is important that all British Columbians have equal opportunity to work on any public infrastructure project. And it's just very, very concerning to me to see public policy that's put in place that discriminates against 85% of the workers in this province.
Thank you, Greg. Sylvia?
Thanks. So Greg's right that cell phone and internet are basically federally regulated, but there are lots of things that we can do on the ground to make sure that we're heard, that this is a problem for us. And I think that local and regional and provincial governments need to work together to lobby to get better opportunities for these kinds of things, to make sure that we're not paying too much, because we are, and it's not just here in BC, it's across Canada. Countries around the world are paying far less than we are. The union issue that Greg is talking about, these CBA agreements, I have to disagree with his hand-picked union, whatever it is that he's saying. It's not hand-picked unions, it's unions, period. And I think that it's study after study after study has shown that the rate of unionization of an area, a community, a region, a state, a province is completely and directly correlated with the strength of your economy. And you can compare the states from California to Alabama and see that the higher the rate of unionization, the stronger their economy is. So when you put CBA agreements in and you hire people that are unionized, you have safer workplaces, you have higher wages, which means people go home at the end of the week and they spend money on things which keep the economy strong. And so I think that this is a red herring that's being tossed around here on the CBAs.
Thank you, Sylvia. We're going to move on to the next question. Does your party have any plans to reintroduce MSP premiums? Does your party plan to eliminate the employer health tax or extend the exemption threshold to 1.5 million to remove more of the small businesses from this tax? And we'll start with Sylvia.
Yeah, so the NDP don't have any plans to reintroduce the MSP. They know that putting $1,800 back into the pockets of young families and small families is the way to make sure that people have enough money to feed themselves and house themselves and keep spending money on extra things, which is it's money that makes the world go around. And so when we talk about growing the economy, that's just a conversation about how much money is being spent in our communities. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind. They don't have any plan to eliminate the employer health tax at this point either. Small businesses, as I said before, are not burdened by this tax. Small businesses don't pay any of this tax. Only the top earning and payroll, I guess, businesses in the province are actually paying this tax. And as I said before, it's a graduated tax. So the less income your company shows, the lower your employer health tax is. And it's really important that the companies at the top, including the provincial government, I mean, schools and hospitals, they're both employers of union shops, basically, and they were paying for the MSP premiums of people already. And so now they've switched over from paying my MSP premium to paying the employer health tax. And so this idea that it's this brand new burden that's really weighing people down, good employers were already paying the MSP for their employees. So this is nothing new.
Thank you, Sylvia. Owen?
No, the Green Party does not want to reintroduce MSP premiums. It wants to plug a giant hole in our MSP writ large, which is the space for mental health care, which is currently missing. We should treat mental health issues like any other health issue. And we have a chronic scenario amongst our youth who are watching wishful thinking from different governments about climate change and the bigger crises they have. They're talking the talk, not walking the walk. The employer health tax, no, we don't plan to eliminate that either.
Thank you, Owen. Greg?
Great. Yeah, so contrary to some of the commentary that's been put out by the NDP, no, there is no desire or interest in bringing back the medical services premium. That has been gone by. And but the employer health tax, it is a significant expense to businesses, as I mentioned. Small business owners, even those that starting at $500,000 in annual gross sales, do have to pay the employer health tax. So it is a cost associated with those small businesses. And in talking to many small businesses, if individuals think that suddenly the MSP was just suddenly a free gift by the NDP, I'll tell you what, the majority of employers, these are private sector employers that I have spoken to, have indicated that it is an additional cost. And so what has largely happened for many British Columbians, although you may not be paying an MSP premium, you are paying an increased price for goods or services, or in some cases, you may even have foregone a wage increase because there's been that additional cost burden that's put on the backs of employers through the employer health tax. There's no free ride, folks. Although the NDP did say that they were eliminating MSP, they didn't eliminate it. They just replaced it with a new form of taxation called the employer health tax. And as I mentioned, that's an additional $1.9 billion a year of new taxation right on the backs of businesses. And we need to always be mindful of the competitiveness that we have. We're in an increasingly international global market where businesses that are operating in BC need to be on a level playing field and not have a disadvantage to other provinces or other jurisdictions where we might compete.
Sorry, Greg, got to cut you off there. Thank you. We're moving on to the next question. What has your party done to value and reflect the feedback and wishes of the LGBTQ2SA plus people? What do you feel needs to be provided for the LGBTQ2S? Sorry, guys. I'll just try that again. The LGBTQ2SA plus people, if you are elected.
Thanks. I hope that you guys will allow us a little bit of leeway and just shorten it to LGBT or LGBTQ for the conversation, because it's a mouthful. But I think that the NDP has a long history of supporting people that are genderqueer or gay or lesbian. And they've showed that they've been at pride rallies for years and years and years and years, and they've run candidates that are LGBTQ. I think that they've done a very good job of making sure that the candidates this time around reflect the sort of population that we have. We have, 46 women, I think it is, running, 5 Indigenous people, people of every cultural background, people that are LGBTQ. And so it's important that if we want to make changes that help people feel accepted into our community, they need to see themselves reflected in the caucus and in the Parliament building, in their governments, local and otherwise. And so the NDP has always been very committed to this, has worked very hard to make sure that they have made commitments to this. They support unions who also support LGBTQ because LGBTQ people are looking for exactly what everybody's looking for, and that is acceptance and a sense of value for who they are, and not having to be made to feel ashamed of who they are and how they're made. And so I think that our party's record stands on its own 2 feet, or stands on its own record in this area.
Sylvia, Owen, if you will.
Yeah, so in the 3.5 years the Green Party got to share power with the BC NDP, one of its achievements it's most proud of is that it successfully fought for and got coverage for a treatment for those who are vulnerable to HIV. It's called PrEP. I'm not a doctor and I don't know very well how the treatment works itself. All I know is that it's effective, and now it's covered under our MSP in the province, so that those vulnerable to HIV can have their health better protected.
Thank you. Greg?
Thank you. Well, in today's society, there is absolutely no room for discrimination in any form. BC Liberals, we are certainly welcoming individuals from all across, from all different ethnic backgrounds, LGBTQ, and so there's absolutely no place for discrimination, period, in British Columbia, whether it comes to race, religion, sexual orientation, or otherwise. And so, the question, although it was posed as, what would we do to help, I guess, make them feel more welcoming? Sylvia did mention that I think it is important that any political party have individuals within their mix that provides representation of different groups throughout British Columbia and Canada. And I think you will see that we've got a very diverse group of candidates running for the BC Liberals in this current election that will reflect all ethnicities, background, and gender profiles to better reflect all of British Columbia, because we're such a welcoming society here.
Thank you. Next question. This is the final question. The 2016 Rental Housing Index indicated that 30% of the region spends between 30 and 50% of its income on housing, which is deemed either unaffordable or severely unaffordable. What are your party's plans to address the affordable housing issue moving forward? And we'll start with Owen.
So, well, you hear a lot of rhetoric around the issue of affordability. You know, when I talk to young people, they don't get rhetoric. They get that they can't afford a home that their parents had, and it feels like a kick in the teeth. So the BC Greens know this, and one of the main campaign promises it has made in the last few days is that it will pay a large amount of the cost of rent for those who are paying more than 30% of their income on rent. So it's $500 million for the program, and it is set down by the BC Greens. The goal overall is by 2030, everyone will have a home they can afford and a home that meets their needs. So the BC Greens is on this. The affordability issue started with the BC Liberals. It has not been fixed by the BC NDP. The Green Party isn't just going to talk the talk. It has a plan, and it can meet it by 2030.
Thank you. Greg?
Great. Housing affordability certainly is an issue, and affordability is something different in every community. Very different story in the Lower Mainland than it might be here in the North Shuswap or in Salmon or in Sicamous area. But you know, there's a couple pieces. The biggest cost driver that's increasing the price of housing has to do with the reduced supply. This is economics 101. Increase the supply, prices go down. You diminish supply, prices go up. We need to have a robust plan to encourage more housing construction, both for low, middle, and other income areas, to try and increase the housing supply in general, all across British Columbia. And the provincial sales tax elimination, or PST holiday, for the first year, and the reduction in second and subsequent years will provide a significant reduction in the cost of new housing. And we need to be working alongside our municipal governments to help encourage and expedite building permits. We are hearing in Vancouver, building permit for a single family home taking upwards of 4 years. Just think about that. When you've purchased a piece of property, it can take you up to 4 years before you can even get a building permit to start construction. That drives the cost of housing up significantly, as well as many of the district community charges, development cost charges that are applied for municipalities. Those also contribute significantly. In the Lower Mainland alone, all forms of taxation provide upwards of $340,000 of additional taxation cost just on the construction of a new home. And so there's going to be a multifaceted approach to try and increase housing stock in all sectors of our province.
Thank you, Greg. Sylvia?
Hi. I'm not sure if I missed something there, but as a member of City Council, I can tell you it doesn't take 4 years to get a building permit. But regardless, I think that there are two approaches that we take from the NDP's perspective on solving this issue. One is short-term. There are some people in our communities that will not be able to afford a house, whether or not it's because they're disabled and they can't work to save enough money, or maybe they're seniors and they chose to rent because they don't want to own their own home anymore, or maybe they're just young people moving out and they haven't got around to buying a house yet. And those people are all renting. And 3 years ago, the NDP, or 2 years ago, the NDP actually tabled a proposition in Parliament to have a $400 rental rebate, and were unable to get it passed because they couldn't get the support of the other parties. So the first thing that they would do if they get back in power and are a majority government in particular, think of a minority government, I think they'll still propose it and hope for some support. But they've proposed a $400 a month rental rebate for people who are severely overpaying for their housing. The long-term solution, though, is, as Greg said, is to increase the supply. And they've started doing that in a couple of ways. One is the speculation tax, which means if you have a house sitting empty, an empty houses tax, and the speculation tax, if you have places sitting empty, you're going to pay more tax on them. So last year, 11,000 new condos, not new, 11,000 condos were newly introduced into the long-term rental market, which helped bring supply up, which helps bring prices down. The other part of the solution is 114,000 units over 10 years of affordable housing being built across the province. And that's being done in conjunction with local governments and not-for-profits that are able to organize it from the ground and make sure that there's land and that it will be managed when it's done. There are 25,000.
Sorry, we have closing remarks. minutes too, I'm sorry.
Okay.
We ran out of time. But that is the end of our question and answer period. We're going to move to our candidates' closing remarks. And we're going to start with Greg, and we have 4 minutes each.
Great. Well, thank you. Well, thank all of you who are at home listening in or watching in on this Zoom call. Certainly unprecedented times due to COVID. But, folks, I just got to say it's truly been my privilege and honor to serve as your representative for the last 7.5 years. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to continue to serve as your BC Liberal candidate here in the Shuswap. There's many challenges that we have in front of us. COVID has presented unprecedented times. From a healthcare perspective, our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, has done a stellar job of helping to guide us through this pandemic. It was actually the BC Liberal government that appointed our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, back prior to the 2017 election. And just want to give folks just some assurance that regardless of what government forms after this provincial election, Dr. Bonnie Henry will still continue to be there to help provide guidance to government. When we have a look at the need for governments to take direction from your chief medical officer, it's not much different than a chief of surgery at Shuswap Lake General Hospital. Regardless of what government may or may not be in power, the job and the role and responsibility of that chief of surgery, it stays the same. And so just want to give people the assurance that regardless of the outcome of this election, whatever government does form after the October 24th election, Dr. Bonnie Henry will continue to be there. Now, I'm very proud of our leader, Andrew Wilkinson. He's an extremely intelligent man, was trained as a medical doctor. He practiced in Dease Lake and Lillooet and other remote communities across British Columbia. And as well, he's a trained lawyer. But on the medical doctor side, I think he will be able to provide some very valuable input should we be successful in forming government as we guide ourselves through this pandemic. The unemployment rate is extremely high. I have always believed that a healthy community is a working community. Whenever we see high rates of unemployment, we see higher incidents of domestic violence, higher percentages of domestic or family breakdown, higher drug and alcohol abuse, and higher crime rates. And so the most important thing that we should be looking at focusing on right now is how do we get people back to work? How do we ensure that we provide those supports for small businesses so that they can actually hire and provide those all-important family supporting jobs? Folks, we really need to be putting all of our shoulders to the wheel of getting our economy moving again. With a bigger economy, with more people working, more people paying taxes, more funds will flow to the provincial government to provide for all those necessary supports that we rely on, whether it's healthcare, social services, or all of the other supports that government provide. So, just kind of really hitting it home, and the fact that it's really unfortunate that we're dealing with this unnecessary election right now. It's really unfortunate that John Horgan decided to play the ultimate double cross on Sonia Furstenau, the leader of the Green Party. But you know what? We need to be looking forward to a brighter future, to creating opportunity for all British Columbians and restoring confidence. We need to restore confidence in the business sector so that people are willing to open their wallets, invest capital, and actually create those very important family supporting jobs that we all rely on to provide that future for our kids and our grandkids.
Thank you, Greg. Owen, with your closing remarks.
Yeah, listen, thank you for participating, everybody. If a government was to come to you and say, we're going to end smoking in BC, but we're going to plant the whole of the Okanagan Valley in tobacco, some red flags will go off in your head. It's sort of Orwellian double speak. Both the BC Liberals and the BC NDP have committed to fixing climate change, yet they have supported, funded, subsidized the gas industry in the north of the province to produce climate changing gases in the form of frack gas and now proposed LNG terminals, which will come to fruition on our west coast. As a result, we have not met our targets on climate change. Our youth watch on and they see us make these promises but do exactly the opposite. So they're suffering, their mental health is suffering. They know they're going to pay the costs of climate change. They know they can't afford a home. Now, we all have one thing in common. We're not here on this planet forever. So we have a legacy, and we owe it to the youth, our children, to hand them a stable future. I stood up. I'm a farmer. I stopped farming this week so I could do this. So I can accept if we don't meet our climate changing targets, and we have runaway climate change, because I stood up and was counted. And I'm asking you to. Don't believe the BC Liberals and the BC NDP when they say they're going to stop climate change, because they have not. The targets were based on 2007 figures. We were to have 33% less than that going out into the atmosphere by this year. Not only do we not have less than 33%, we don't even have less than 1%. And now the BC NDP has rejigged the numbers and said, well, in the next 10 years, we'll have 40% less. It's magical thinking, and it comes from the support for that party by fossil fuel companies. Now, the BC Greens were the first to say we are banning corporate sponsorship donations to our party, and now the other parties have to follow suit. Climate change is the mother of all challenges, and I believe all of the other challenges we have in society get better when we face up to it, when we do better by it. The 3.5 years the BC Greens had in power were very fruitful. We protected salmon. We participated in the creation of the Clean BC program, which I agree with Greg, we're straying away from it, certainly with the support of LNG. We brought about a livable wage that's likely because of the Fair Wage Commission. We removed donations not only from corporations, but from trade unions too. Why should union leaders govern our future? Why can't we? We looked at oversight on spending after the scandal in the legislature. And then finally, we're dealing with professional alliance, which means the government is offloading its duties to engineers who are then put under pressure. So we need to step up and actually govern the way we're supposed to. I'm a reality check. I'm someone who's saying to you, I won't be whipped by Sonia. It doesn't happen in the BC Green Party. We're a little bit different that way. We need to take the hold that oil and gas industry has on our politics out of both BC and in Canada. These are sunset industries, and only the Green Party will bring us to a better future. Thanks.
Thank you, Owen. And Sylvia, with your closing remarks.
Thank you. So thank you to Adam and Corinne for putting this event on, and all the people I know that are working behind the scenes to make sure that this goes off without a hitch. We really appreciate that. And we appreciate all the people who have logged on tonight and are taking part, learning about what our parties stand for and what they can expect going forward. I'm happy to sit here and tell you about some of the things the progress that we've made under John Horgan's government, and to share some of the plans that we have that will keep BC moving forward. So we've removed MSP premiums and made adult education free again. And we are building schools and hospitals and primary care facilities. And we've hired doctors and nurses and teachers. And all these actions are to support the lives of working people like you and me. We know that there is a hope around the corner sometime that we may get a school in Salmon Arm, a downtown school, which we desperately need. That we know that infrastructure is being funded, and we're seeing improvements on the Trans-Canada Highway. And all these things, the attitude that the BC NDP put forward and the way that they work to protect working people, they give me hope that when my grandkids grow up, that they're going to live in a world that cares about them. And that's the important thing to me. I'm not going to always be here to help them, to provide for them. And I want to know that when I'm gone, the community is looking out for each other, and the legislation that we have in our province is designed to help do that. So the key issues facing our province right now are the pandemic and climate change. And I think the BC NDP have a pretty well-proven track record on the COVID-19 situation, and everybody's on board. All parties are on board. Most citizens are on board, and we're working together to keep cases low so that we can stay open for business. And in this unprecedented time, we've been led confidently through a science-based approach that's working. So climate change is going to be the same. John Horgan's government released Clean BC a while ago, and just this week released a platform that includes aggressive climate action and a solid plan to get us to net zero carbon by 2050, including sequestering carbon that's already been released into the atmosphere. And these are important things that we need to be working on, and they already have a plan in place. They're working on that plan. The plan has been set into motion. It's interesting that Greg has told us about a bunch of things that they did between 2013, 2017. Well, that was their third term. So they spent the first term, like any government, figuring out what the problems are, figuring out how we're going to fix them, and then setting in motion plans to do that. And the NDP government, in conjunction with the Greens in particular, have done a really good job of identifying where the issues are and starting plans in motion to solve them. So beyond this, we need to focus on mental health supports, addictions treatment and supports, jobs, small business, infrastructure in our small communities, and transit improvements and healthcare. All these are issues that the NDP government is doing great work on already, and we have the power to give them the time that they need to see these projects through to completion. I don't want to go back to the years of shortages and closures, and I'm sure that you don't want to go back to that either. We've made a great start, but Rome wasn't built in a day or 3.5 years, as the case may be. So it's important that we continue to support this government. They've just started making forward motion, and if we change governments now, we're going to end up in a situation where we have to start all over at square one. We spent 16 years going backwards, losing ground financially, losing services we all count on, watching our loved ones struggle to make ends meet. I don't want to go back to that. We have an opportunity to join together in this movement, to really get behind a leader who cares about us and has our backs. And I want to be your partner in this endeavor. I love the Shuswap and the people who live here, and I'm invested in making the best that it can be for all of its residents, from students to seniors and from homeless to homeowners. I'm committed, and I can be counted on to hear your concerns, to work with various levels of government on your behalf, and to support your communities in developing to their greatest potential. On October 24th, I ask for your support to make me part of the great team that's currently governing our province, so that we can build up our region and our community. On October 24th, I ask you to vote BC NDP. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone that tuned in tonight, and thank all of our candidates, Greg and Owen and Sylvia. Remember to cast your ballot, to vote on October 24th, and we all just learned who we can stand behind. Thank you from the Salmon Arm Chamber of Commerce, and have a good night.